Welcome to Checklist for Survival, a series of videos produced by John Stewart, president of QP Consulting, Inc. John Stewart is also co-author, along with fellow industry consultant Larry Hunt, of a book titled Print Shop for Sale. This book has been used by thousands of print shop owners, both independent and franchise, as well as franchisors and business brokers, to calculate the value of a printing business. Print Shop for Sale is available through John's website at www.quickconsultant.com. The book offers a step-by-step guide for establishing a fair market value for a printing firm, whether you are a seller or the buyer. This video, titled Valuing a Printing Business, will discuss a basic valuation formula known as the excess earnings approach. Now, let's join John Stewart as he discusses this and other key aspects of valuing a printing business.
Good morning, everyone. At least it's morning here in Melbourne, Florida. It's November 5th. We're going to be presenting two short videos this morning, both dealing with valuing a printing firm. Although, quite honestly, the basic formula that we're going to use and demonstrate this morning can be used to value almost any business. The first of the two videos, and I'm going to try to keep these pretty short, the first of the two videos is going to deal with the basic formula called excess earnings. It's the excess earnings approach to valuing a business. And then right after that, we're going to do another short video, and we're going to demonstrate by using a real-world firm and how we would go about valuing that firm. Okay, we're going to be using an iPad, and we're going to be using a number of charts as we have in my prior series. And the first one is going to be, the first one that you're going to see that we're going to cut to in just a second, is a valuation formula. The valuation formula basically says a business is worth its excess earnings times a multiplier plus the net assets of the firm. But before we can get to this critical element, what we call excess earnings, we don't know what excess earnings are until we compute owner's compensation. And I want to give you a clear definition of that because it's so critical. If you can't determine your owner's compensation and do it accurately, we're never going to be able to value your firm, and you're never going to be able to demonstrate to a potential buyer that it is worth X dollars. Defining owner's compensation is fairly simple. Owner's compensation is everything that is left over after covering all the expenses of a business, cost of goods, payroll, overhead expenses, but before paying the primary working owner a salary or giving that owner any fringe benefits. The first thing we're going to tell you is you're going to need to take a financial statement, and you're going to need to circle and or demonstrate somewhere in that financial statement exactly what your total owner's compensation is. In the second video, we give you an actual demonstration of that. Okay, now we're going to move on to the chart that I just talked about a second ago, and we're going to demonstrate exactly how we calculate, or actually what a fair market salary for an owner would be at different sizes. As you can see, applying the formula, $14,000 plus 4% of sales, all marked up by 18%, produces this kind of table. A company that has $500,000 in sales, in annual sales, we calculate a fair market salary for that company to be $40,120. A $1 million company, applying that same formula, its a fair market salary calculation would be $63,720. That means the owner of a $1 million company is entitled to a minimum of approximately $63,000. We expect that company to earn in excess of that amount because that's what we call excess earnings. So if in your company, in your operation, whether you're a $1 million company, a $750,000 company, you need to calculate this formula. And if your company is not producing in excess of that basic fair market salary, you've got some serious problems already in our valuation approach. By the way, I had another slide that I was going to demonstrate, but we're not going to use it right now because basically, why not? The question that needs to be addressed is, hey, what about my wife's salary? You know, she works in the business. The two of us take out $100,000 in this business. So, you know, really our total owner's compensation is $100,000. No, it isn't. When you sell your business, unless you plan to sell your wife with the business, the new owner is going to have to come in and replace your wife. Now, you may be paying her $50,000 and yourself $50,000. Let's assume that possibly what your wife is doing, or your husband, what their actual real world functions might entitle them, a real world salary for them might be $30,000 to $35,000. We can go out in the street and hire somebody $30,000, $35,000. And so the difference between that $35,000 and the $50,000 would be $15,000. That would be excess compensation to the spouse. And we would add that to hopefully the excess compensation of the owner itself. But it is very important. You can't add the salaries paid to your spouse or your partner, or for that matter, your children, and say, this is what we take out of the business. That is very well true. You and the rest of your family may indeed collectively take out that much money. But recognizing the fact that those people are going to have to be replaced when your business is sold, we're only dealing with the total owner's compensation paid to one individual. Okay, we're going to move on to our next slide. Our next slide deals with the difference, as I've already stressed, I think, excess earnings versus owner's compensation. The slide looks like this. By the way, almost all of these slides will be available on my website. We want to emphasize now, because as we move into the second presentation, it's going to be important that you know some of these terms, that we want to explain the difference between what we defined as excess earnings and the owner's compensation here. And the just to clarify and impress upon you the importance, excess earnings equals the owner's compensation less a fair market salary. We've already done both those things. And one additional relatively minor fact, and that is we also subtract from the excess earnings calculation 10% of the net assets being sold. Basically, if we're selling $300,000 in net assets, that's equipment, furniture, and fixtures, we're going to subtract $30,000 from the excess earnings calculation to arrive at our final excess earnings number. And essentially, excess earnings, as we note here, excess earnings is the profit generated by the business after allowing for a fair market salary for the owner and a fair market return on net assets. If these assets, or if you took that $300,000 and you invested it in stocks, bonds, a number of other safer investments, you'd be entitled to a return on that investment. So therefore, that's part of the logic why we subtract 10% from our initial calculation to account for the fact, and we allow for 10% because it's a much riskier investment than it might be in stocks and bonds, etc. So in the end, and to emphasize in this first video, we are involved, and it is very important to stress that you can calculate on your financial statements what your total excess earnings are. And first of all, we have to calculate owner's compensation. We're going to go through the process, and you're going to end up with a number that you're going to see we're going to use in our second video called excess earnings. And it's very important that you're able to calculate that properly. It's also very important to realize that if your company produces no excess earnings, or worse, if you are not taking out a wage or salary at least equivalent to the table I showed you previously, your company has little value other than the fair market value, the street value of the net assets. In many cases, the net assets, even though you may have assigned $200,000 or $150,000, the reality, as you well know today, might be $100,000. You might be able to go out and replace that equipment for $100,000. So after all these years of investment and hard work, you end up with being able to sell net assets and net assets only. With that in mind, we're going to close this first video, and we're going to move to a second video that we title A Real-World Valuation, where we're going to take a real company and we're going to go through the process that I just explained here and see how we arrive at a value for that printing business. Thank you very much for watching, and look forward to the next video. Thank you very much.